Welcome to Southern Sense Talk on Rumble. You are going to love Annie the Radio Chickadee Ubelis and her co-host, C.S. Bennett. You'll find them live here on Fridays from 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Date Time. Check out their website at Southern Sense, as in commonsense.net. It's that easy, southernsense.net. So sit back and relax. They're informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey.
Good afternoon and welcome back to another adventure here. I don't have a sound coming in. Why do I have not any sound? All right, we got a problem over here, folks. I have no sound. I don't know why I don't have any sound. Blog Talk, no longer on Blog Talk Radio. I gotta remember where the heck I am. On Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Rumble, Substack, and here on our own webpage, Southern Sense. We've got a guest co-host today, our former congressman from the great state of Florida, Ted Yoho. Good afternoon, Ted. How are you today?
Hey, Ann, how are you doing? And it is the great state of Florida. Glad to be here. Covering for that Curtis fella.
Well, I gotta laugh because our state house passed a new budget just the other day, and someone went and posted a comment on the budget, which they didn't do too bad a job, but they said, well, if the state of Tennessee and the state of Florida can have no income tax and still run the state, why can't we?
Yeah,
and
really.
I said, dang.
All goes back to local government.
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. If I sound a little discombobulated, first off, we don't have Curtis. He is out working the polls in Florida for the special election. I believe it's in District 21. No, 21 is New York. I think it's 1 and 28 in Florida.
Here in Florida, 1 and 6.
Yeah, 1 and 6. Okay.
6, and that's for the Mike Waltz's seat. Mike was our congressman.
Right. And we heard as of today, or actually, I think it was starting last night, Elise Stefanik has withdrawn her name as ambassador to the UN because District 21, we had Anthony Constantino, who is running for that seat, and he's being primaried by 9 other Republicans. Even though he was leading, he's the one that put the big Trump sign up on the side of his building, sticker mule. Yeah, we had him on 2 weeks ago. But I guess they figure he's not polling as well as they want him to, and to preserve the seat, they're going to leave Elise Stefanik there, which to me makes sense.
It does. And I tell you, that shows you the character of Elise. Elise had a shoe-in for the UN ambassador, but she saw this seat was in jeopardy. And then the other thing, Ann, is that this shows you the ground game that the Democrats are putting together. They're throwing everything at these special election seats, and Elise saw that, so she took herself out of that race to preserve the majority in the House. And not many people would be willing to give up advancing your career forward, but she did that, and that says a lot about her character. And in our district 6 in Florida, Mike Waltz stepped out. He's a national security advisor. And there's a gentleman that doesn't live in the district, and this is certain of Randy Fine. He's a Republican. He was in the state house, I think, for 5 or 6 terms, and then he just got elected to the Senate. And he's not doing as well. The Democrats in this election, and it's a strong R election. I think Trump carried this by 20 or 30 points. So did Waltz. The Democrats have put in over $8 million into this race.
Wow. I mean,
they're out to get it.
Yeah, it's a special election, and they're throwing that money left and right. And what about any hijinks in the voting also?
Right. Well, that's why
That's
Kirk's
also,
doing what he's doing. And I
yeah,
commend him
and God
for
bless
doing
him for doing that. But it's a lot, because also now in Pennsylvania we lost a Senate seat because they didn't push the Republicans to get out and do the early voting.
it. Yeah.
So,
And the
and
Democrats,
people say, well, early voting, well, that's when they can really tamper with your votes. But here in South Carolina, we did that here, especially we are heavy in our district here in pushing for the early voting. And we actually had 75% of the registered Republicans show up to vote. It was a landslide.
wow, is that a special election and you had that kind of a turnout?
No, that was just regular turnout.
Okay,
It was
okay.
like for the November election. But we
Yeah,
went and we really worked it. And you got to
yeah,
say, our county chair, he's a dynamo. He
yeah.
really
Well,
is a dynamo. I got to hand it to him.
that's what it's going to take is that grassroots effort between now and the midterms. Of course, we have these special elections coming up, and it's going to take that right now. And the Democrats are doing everything they can on the ground game, and then they throw in all their antics of anger, violence, yelling and cussing at people.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
they're going to
they do.
continue. This is only 60 days into the Trump administration.
No, and not even a full 2 months. And, it's getting crazier and crazier by the day. And now we've got this thing with Signalgate. You got Bozeman turning around and saying, no, I have more power than the president over immigration. It is absolutely crazy out there. And the funny thing is, I got invited to our local Rotary to speak this morning. Me getting up at 6 a.m. I haven't done that since I worked back in 19.
Back when you're chasing bad guys.
But I actually had a blast. And the topic was, what is an American? And it really made me think back to my immigrant roots, because I'm only second generation American, and why I do what I do here on the show, and why I do what I do for the Tea Party, and why I feel this for this nation. And what I'm going to do is I've got to edit it a little bit because the gentleman that recorded it cut off the first few minutes, so I have to record that portion of it. And we don't do a show on Good Friday because for me it's a day of obligation. Um, I've always avoided doing on Good Friday, and
Good for
I
you.
think I'm going to take that video and post it up for Good Friday and give people pause to think of the blessings we have and what was sacrificed for us on that day. And if we don't honor that sacrifice, who are we?
It was interesting. I was in Israel on a trip that you do as a freshman, and it was basically their Veterans Day or Memorial Day. I can't remember which one. Everything shuts down. All businesses shut down. I said, it's interesting. And I said, I really respect this because the whole nation takes off to honor the veterans. In America, man, it's business as usual. It's the day of sales. Let's make more money and things like that. And we cheapen it is what we do. And as one of the members of Congress said, they whore out those special holidays to make money instead of putting the focus on what they were designed to do.
Exactly. And when they have the parades, they show that when they bring the kids to the parades, the kids grow up to be more patriotic.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need to start having more parades in our communities.
Unless you're running for Congress and then you have to do 5 parades in a day.
Suck it up. Suck it up.
Suck it up, Buttercup. We had a lot of fun at our parade. We had 13 counties at the time, and our whole entourage would move from county to county. It was really kind of neat.
Oh man, I can see that. And here we have the golf carts.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we got ourselves some really, really, really great guests. We've got Dr. Robert Malone here. He's the one that developed the mRNA.
He sure is. I followed him, so that's good.
Yeah, and also we have Dr. Stanley Ridgley. He's a professor at Drexel University, but he's got a new book out, Unraveling What is Behind DEI. And oh my God, you read that book and you get more and more angry. And all along, I've said it's been a con game. And he proved
It
it.
is.
He takes it, he tears it apart. And he said a multi-million. I'm saying, no, it's not just a multi-million. It's more than a multi-billion. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. The same thing as climate change. It's a
Yeah.
huge hoax, and it's a trillion-dollar industry. And listening to, what was it? Angus, what's the guy's name? First name is Angus. Yeah.
Angus King.
Angus King. Right. Thank you.
From Maine.
How can you not think King beef, Angus? Going on and on about, well, they said climate change is a national security issue. So why isn't it in the budget? Blah, 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 blah. You know, can I just take a 2x4 and hit him over the head with it and knock some sense into him?
Those are, as you said, those are trillion-dollar industries. And it was money given out really bad under the Biden administration. I was up with Steve King in Iowa, and they were talking about the pipelines coming in. And the people that were behind that, former Governor Branstad, and they were all getting kickbacks from this. They were all leading this, and it was for CO2 capture, you know, bring it out of from manufacturing on fertilizer plants and ethanol plants. And then they're piping that down to Texas. So they're going after the pollution of CO2 from carbon fuels. So they put billions of dollars in this infrastructure. Hopefully it gets stopped. Going down to Texas, where they pump it in underground to do what? To pump more oil. It's like, it's lunacy is what it is.
It is. It is. It's a huge con game. But, you know, plants need CO2 to grow. And if the more you have CO2 in the oxygen, in the air, in the atmosphere, the more plentiful crops you have, the more you can feed the hungry at a cheaper price because you have so much bounty. Hello, people.
This year's climate change conference was down in South America, and I think it was in Brazil, where they cut down 8 square miles of tropical rainforest to put in a runway.
Oh yeah, the runway through the rainforest so that people can get to the conference.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, listen, you know that we start off each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And today's dedication is going to go out to the teeth and straight Detective Allan Riddins of the Oak Park Police Department in Illinois. His end of watch was on Friday, November 29th, 2024. And briefly before I play the video, a brief read on what had happened. Detective Allan Reddins was shot and killed while responding to a report of an armed man leaving a bank in the 1000 block of Lake Street. He and other officers encountered the man 2 blocks away in the 800 block and instructed him to show his hands. The man produced a handgun and opened fire, striking Detective Reddins in the side. Other officers returned fire and wounded the subject before taking him into custody. Detective Reddins was transported to Loyola University Medical Center, where he succumbed to his wound approximately 30 minutes later. The suspect had an extensive criminal record and was charged with attempted murder of a police officer, possession of a firearm, and unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. Detective Reddins had served in the Oak Park Police Department for 5 years and previously served with the Metro Police Department. He survived by a son and a mother. And here is today's dedication.
We begin with a breaking news update this evening. Charges filed in the killing of an Oak Park police officer. Our Sarah Maki is in Oak Park at a growing memorial there.
37-year-old Gerald Thomas is still being treated at the hospital, so no word yet on when he will make his first appearance in court. But out here right now, a growing memorial for the fallen officer at the site of the shooting. Announcing the charges, police say 37-year-old Gerald Thomas comes with an extensive criminal background. Now also charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder of a police officer, possession of a stolen firearm, and unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. At Oak Park Police Station, purple and black draped across the front of the building. A memorial to the fallen officer installed the morning after his death. With the department since 2019, Oak Park detective Allan Reddins was responding to the call of a person with a gun leaving Chase Bank on Lake Street Saturday morning when he was shot. A bullet hitting the left side of his body.
And then I just hear shots ring out.
Video from the scene shows their suspect, Thomas, on the ground, taken away on a stretcher, shot in the leg. Bullet holes in the windows of the village's main library. Reddins now remembered for the family he leaves behind, including a 19-year-old son, and his dedication to serving others. Police say that Thomas has been arrested for violence incidents in the past, including domestic battery, as well as situations involving police. They say he's been arrested for aggravated battery to a police officer and resisting a police officer. From Oak Park, Sarah Maki, CBS News, Chicago.
Sarah, thank you so much. And sharing memories and a growing memorial, tonight the Oak Park community is mourning the loss of police detective Allan Reddins. Sarah Maki spoke with Reddins' former boss on the same night police have charged a suspect with first-degree murder in his death.
Purple and black fabric is draped across the front of Oak Park Police Department, a memorial to their fallen officer installed the morning after his death.
It's devastating, and it's a complete shock to all of us at the Oak Park Police Department and everybody who knew him.
Former Oak Park Sergeant Tracy Love was back at the station Saturday, where she was one time a supervisor to Allan Reddins. The officer, she says, you could always count on.
If you hear Reddins going to the call, you know for sure that it's going to be handled. He just had an ability to calm things down. And the reason why he was able to do that is because he was able to slow it down.
But Reddins might not have gotten the chance to do that Friday. With Oak Park since 2019, the former Metro police officer was responding to the call of a person with a gun leaving Chase Bank on Lake Street Friday morning when he was shot. A bullet hitting the left side of his body. Video from the scene shows suspect Gerald Thomas on the ground, then taken away on a stretcher, shot in the leg. Bullet holes in the windows of the village's main library. Announcing charges this weekend, police said 37-year-old Thomas comes with an extensive criminal background. Now also charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder of a peace officer, possession of a stolen firearm, and unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. This loss, a line-of-duty death, is something that Oak Park has not seen with their police department in more than 90 years. People now looking to find ways to honor the man who gave his life for their community. We were there as neighbors, stopped by a growing memorial near where officers responded. They didn't know Detective Reddins, but wanted to pay their respects and bring flowers.
He loved our community so much that he became a police officer here and gave his life for all of us.
And so to have this happen right here in the center of the village is very counter to kind of the spirit of our community.
Love says Oak Park residents have been sharing photos of Reddins with her since his death, a fixture in this community.
That's just the type of guy that he was. You have people coming into the lobby asking specifically, can I speak to Allan?
A detective remembered for his dedication to serving others and the family he leaves behind, including a 19-year-old son. From Oak Park, Sarah Maki, CBS News, Chicago.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. I was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. Oh, precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. snares I have already come. His grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing
All right, and we are back. We have our guest co-host here, Ted Yoho. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chickadee. Oh man, we have ourselves a great show, and want to thank everyone that's joining us right now. I see the hits coming in, and I got to tell you, Ted, the last show we did last week, we started off slow like today with the low number of people popping in, but before we had gone maybe less than an hour, 45 minutes, the numbers started flying through the roof. And when I looked, the final numbers were over 17,300 hits on that one show. And I got to thank you guys out there in X. You guys just ran it through the roof. I don't know what the numbers are on all the other locations like Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and others, but the numbers have been coming in, and it was a phenomenal show. And we had a last minute guest on there, Maureen Steele. She has a great nonprofit that she works with, and we're going to have her come back. American Made or something like that, I believe it was called American Made Foundation.
Right?
Yeah. She does a really lot of good work. But those looking for C.S. Bennett, he's not with us. He is doing his civic duty. He's out there manning the polls in the special election in 2 districts in Florida.
He's very dedicated in doing that, and I admire that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I've got to get out notifications to poll watchers, to members of my groups, to let them know they're starting training again already for next year. We've got, actually, this November, it's a midterm election. So we want to make sure we keep our numbers up. That's the whole deal.
You remember after the 2016 election when Trump won and beat Hillary, how the resist movement came out? Well, that thing's out. It's out right now. And Chuck Schumer, they put out orders basically through the Democratic grassroots to go and be disruptive at Republican town halls. And Harriet Hagman in Montana, who beat Liz Cheney, she's done 73 live town halls. They've all been peaceful, but since Trump's gotten in the second term, she's had 2 that have gotten real out of control. The protesters are there; they're yelling, shouting, wanting to fight, and so we're seeing a ramp up of the Antifa mindset and the Black Lives Matter. And this is going to go into the midterms, and this is why it's so important that we can't back off. We've got to increase those numbers.
Well, we do. And if you are going to hold any sort of a rally, just make sure you notify local law enforcement.
Right.
There's also the Bikers Across America that will turn around and help you police those. I remember when we started the Tea Party, we notified them a couple of times, and these bikers show up. They're not going to mess with it.
Yeah, we had a lot of those. It was nice to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that goes. Well, listen, we have a gentleman. I told him if he did not show up today, it's 3 strikes, he's out. So if he lifts his head up and smiles at me, we'll bring him on. We've got Dr. Robert Malone. How are you doing today, Dr. Malone? How are you?
Hi, Ann. Sorry for the prior glitches.
Dr. Malone, great to see you and talk to you.
Yeah. Well, I got to admit that we're up live on Substack also now. So just like you, I went into Substack a couple of years ago, and I just finally started getting really involved in posting stuff. So the show has been posted up there. And I was telling Ted Yoho, former Florida congressman, that the last show we did, because we found out we're no longer shadow banned on X. And that one show went over 17,300 hits.
Well,
So
congratulations. There's a strategy that's being used by many of these platforms, including X, that's called small rooming. And what that amounts to is that if you're conservative, they're allowing you now to reach within your contacts, but not outside of that small room.
Wow.
And this is part of the strategy that they're using. They're really trying to, I'm talking about Google, YouTube, usual players, Facebook, of course, are in really across most of social media, except for things like Parler and Truth Social. They're trying to build liberal podcasts that will be able to compete with the big names that they didn't start off on the right, but they kind of got moved to the right, or the left moved further to the left, or whatever you want to call it, as Elon, noted in that little cartoon that he retweeted. But in any case, this strategy of small rooming is apparently now quite prevalent, and so it's easy to get ourselves fooled. There's another strategy also, and we can flip on the switch anytime if you want. But I find these issues. I mean, you brought it up. You find these issues of modern social media. It's an extension of our book on PsyWar. The technologies and methods that are constantly evolving in this battle. Really, it is a battle space.
It is. Well, you know what I found out? When I found out that I was being shadow banned, I had the followers I had built up over, good Lord, since 2009, 2010. All of a sudden, I went down to just a couple hundred. And I'm like, wait a minute, how do I go from all these followers? All of a sudden, they all disappeared. And then I was posting stuff out there, and I had someone message me and said, listen, I went looking for your show specifically on X, and I couldn't find you.
Yeah.
And now when I saw that, they were finally posting me back up on X last week, I was like, yay! Yay, thank you, Elon Musk.
Yeah, I'm reminded of this saying, when you keep hitting your thumb with the hammer, it feels so good when it stops.
That's the truth.
Well, listen, I got following you, and I'll probably have him join us a little bit early. Dr. Stanley K. Ridgley. He wrote a book that dovetails with yours very well. And I've got all my notes here. I printed out from your book. Oops, wait a minute. That's his. This is yours. Yours is the thicker.
Don't ask me about his.
Here,
I'll be real stupid.
But the two of you talk basically on the same subject, but you're looking at it from different angles. Where he's looking at it from DEI, you're looking at it through the PsyWar. And I think, they do marry each other very, very well. Because Ted and I were talking earlier about the con game that is climate change. I've called it a con game from day one. Matter of fact, Gregory Wright, a friend of mine. Matter of fact, I was the very first interview he ever did. So whenever I talk to Gregory, he says, just remember, I'm your first.
There was did you see we covered it in our Substack. Did you see the paper out that had Grok 3 as first author?
No, I missed that.
On climate
Tell
change.
us
So it's pretty definitive. The issue is not whether or not climate change may or may not be occurring. The issue is whether or not it's anthropomorphic, whether it's caused by humans, in particular, whether it's caused by CO2 emissions. And the data just don't support that. It's basically been a series of overinterpretations and more bad modeling, like we saw throughout the COVID crisis, that's then weaponized. There's many more variables that are natural causing, like sunspots, that better fit the data than these human-associated changes in CO2, which is a total of like 2.5% or maybe 3% of total global CO2 emissions. So, and of course that includes China, where it's Katie bar the door, burn as much coal as you want. This is absolutely another weaponized narrative. It's been used to justify agendas that have advanced the interests of certain global parties, including nation states, at the expense of others, such as the United States, in my opinion.
Right.
It is. Your book is excellent. Oh, I'm sorry, Ted. Let me just mention his book, which is called PsyWar, Enforcing the New World Order. You read it several times?
No, I said mention it several times throughout the show.
Oh, yeah. But it's a great book that breaks down and explains the origin of the PsyWar, what the purpose is of it, and how it interrelates with all the different things we see going on in government. And I'm telling you, it's a must read. And we can go into detail in the book a little bit later on if you're willing to do that. We want people to buy the book. So those that are looking at the description on most of the websites, you can click on your name and it will bring them to the book to order the book. And they can download it in Kindle as well as a hard copy.
And not to be too specific, but I sat here at that microphone for a stupid number of hours recording the audiobook. But unfortunately, you can only get it through Amazon. I'm sorry about that. But a lot of people like the audiobook because they can flip it on when they're commuting or doing the dishes or whatever it is.
Ted, you had a question.
Well, no, Dr. Malone, I'm just honored to meet you. I followed you since the COVID, and I saw that you were one of the originators of the mRNA vaccine. I'm a veterinarian by trade, practiced for 28 years. So I've got a strong science background and very fascinated about what you did and the way you were able to come out and go against the grain and just kind of speak what you knew and what the administration was putting out as false. And I was in Congress during that time, and the way this thing was handled, it was misinformation. They were putting in false numbers of the amount of deaths, and if somebody had a fatal car wreck, it would go down as COVID. And we've got case after case after that. And I remember having a discussion with Kevin McCarthy, who was the speaker, the majority leader or minority leader, and Liz Cheney. And I says, this is going to be the biggest hoax played on the American taxpayers outside of the climate change. And I said, what you're putting in there as far as data, as far as the deaths, it's garbage. And Liz, she went on to tell me, well, we've got to have something. And I said, well, garbage in, garbage is out. And this is going to be really looked at in the future, is how we got hoodwinked on this. And so I really appreciate you standing up and starting to talk about what was really going on. And I commend you for that. And I have to read your book, The PsyWar, because I do believe it is, them trying to take over with the New World Order. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm often reminded of the election slogan that was used by President Truman in his, he did another whistle stop tour. That's something you could do back in the day.
Yeah.
And the standard crowd shout and response was, "Give him hell, Harry." And Harry Truman would say, "I just tell the truth, and they think it's hell." So I think that's kind of been my lodestar with this.
Yeah.
Well, it is a huge psychological war. And, we were talking about being banned and shadow banned on X and other platforms, but it is a psychological warfare. They try to wear you down and make you do group think. And I noticed that you recently traveled to Italy. So you have an Italian background, correct? So it's actually Malone.
No,
Is
it's
it?
not. And I have no relationship to Giorgio Malone. I'm not one of the brothers of Italy. But it has, this is my sixth trip to Italy in the last 5 years, really 4 years. And the backstory here for most of this is that a senator in Italy invited a group to come and speak literally in the Senate in Rome. So who's going to say no to speaking in the Senate in Rome? I don't know that I'm ever going to get to speak on the Senate floor in the United States, but Rome is a bad state. And so we were invited to speak by this senator, and I was kind of one of the leads in facilitating this. And while I was there, some friends within the Catholic Church managed to get me into the Vatican. And I got to speak to Archbishop Turkson, who was leading the COVID committee at the time, and convinced him to re-look at the vaccines and the adverse events, which apparently he did advocate with the Pope for reconvening another meeting. And very shortly thereafter, he got ejected out of the Vatican. Good
job.
Yeah.
Good job there, Bob.
But it was fascinating talking to him because he was aware he's forget where from Africa he was from, but he was aware of local remedies that probably were working as anti-inflammatories that he actually personally carried with him to be able to give to somebody early on when they were reporting this. So in any case, we did this thing. And I was attacked in the Italian media as, this is another amazing moment. I was one of the disinformation dozen. We were forbidden from talking about the vaccine when I was there publicly. We could only talk about early treatments. And so the kind of corporate Italian press attacked me and 9 other people. Apparently 10 is a dozen in Italy. And had our pictures, and this was one of those.
There's only. You see, I'm half Italian. There's only 10 fingers. That makes a dozen.
Yeah. So that suddenly I was a darling of the alternative people in Italy, and been back there a bunch of times. Got an award named after a Italian physician that committed suicide because of the harassment he received for administering early treatment. And so this time I went back there. They had 2 main things. The vaccine companies, I met with a couple whistleblowers. It was fascinating. Italy, the Italian public health infrastructure is intimately integrated into the World Health Organization. And a lot of the policies actually flow up from Italian public health into WHO. Another fun fact is that Tony Fauci has decamped to Siena in Tuscany, where he is working closely with Rino Rapulli, his longstanding buddy, who he's been working with since 22, interesting enough, when he was a government employee. Rino Rapulli is the vice president of vaccine development for GSK. There's a great big GSK manufacturing and development plan in Siena, and also one for BioNTech. So Tony is apparently over in Siena, hanging out in, I'm sorry, a very nice villa, and working on developing the next generation of mRNA vaccine and mRNA-based products. And the Italians, at least in my circle, when they were arrested, they were like, Robert, is there any way you can hook up with these states' attorney generals? And now they want me to connect with Kash Patel, because apparently there is an open FBI investigation, I hear rumor. The other issue was that this kind of vaccine cabal that's very entrenched in Italy has also fairly recently implemented pediatric vaccine schedule mandates. And so they were launching a petition drive to try to overturn the government's position on pediatric vaccine mandates. So I was there for that, and then for some media interviews and to meet with these whistleblowers. So it was flying, last time I went to Italy, I did it. I flew in, did the thing, flew out the next day, and I was a train wreck for about 2 weeks. And this time I went there with a broken foot. That's another backstory. A full stomped on my right foot and broke a couple of metatarsals. But so flying in coach across the Atlantic to Rome is no fun, I guarantee. And we took a day before and a day after, so it was a total of 4 days. It wasn't a bad trip. I love Italy. I love the Italian people. One of the things that is so striking, I have to kind of readjust my sense of social propriety. If you go into an Italian meeting and you're shaking hands with people, they see that as you being standoffish.
Yep.
They hug, they kiss, men put their arms around each other. It's totally non-sexual. It's just they touch each other all the time. It's a very different culture. It's very warm, and but there's a downside also. They have lived under decades of socialism, and it has just about killed any sense of entrepreneurship there. That plus the tax rates. If you want a good example of what is going to happen to the American public if the left gets their way with us, go and hang out with Italians that you would think would be very motivated to try to improve their lot and to start businesses, et cetera. And there's plenty of small businesses there, but generally the people are pretty run down. They talk about things like feeling like they're indentured servants, under the thumb of the system. And of course, then there's the mafia that's now pretty well fully integrated with both the finance sector and the government sector.
Like I said, I'm part Italian. I'm half Italian. I keep on teasing my mom because she's full Italian, that the Italian side I sit on. But growing up in that...
I wouldn't say that. I've been married too long.
But growing up in the culture, I'm someone that likes to hug people. And I've had a couple of people go, you hug too much, But it's what you grew up with. And someone sent me a video of my cousin. He passed away at the age of 93 just 3 years ago. And this was a man that was extremely talented, very talented man, especially musically. And he actually composed pieces. And he had one of his compositions, I believe, was played by the Philadelphia Philharmonic.
Wow.
Back in the mid-90s. And I can't find the tape for the life of me. But as I'm watching this, it struck me that the Italian mindset that you're talking about is so ingrained that when he had the chance to tour professionally with the music, his father said, no, you were brought up so you take care of the store here. You take care of the store and you take care of your mother and me. And he gave that all up. And here was a man that he actually was in the same competition as Frank Sinatra. So the man had tremendous talent. He actually toured for 2 years. He didn't go to high school for 2 years because he toured with this hillbilly band they had from Red Bank, New Jersey, across the entire United States and back, and was on TV and everything. He could have been as famous as Jimmy Dorsey probably, and multi-talented in multiple instruments. He went to Juilliard, and he could have had the best of the music world. And when I saw the film, it made me cry because that's the mindset that they have. But that's also the beauty of becoming an American, because that changes that mindset. And matter of fact, the reason why I'm saying that, I spoke before my local Rotary today about what it meant to be an American. And I spoke about my heritage and how I asked the question, why didn't they go back after the war? What was it about America that was so different? And that was what I based it upon. Mm-hmm. And this is what Americans don't understand. So much beauty and wealth we have, so much knowledge, but we're allowing a handful of people to hoodwink us, to psych us out into thinking that we're not as great as we are. We're not as special as we are. We are not as entrepreneurial as we are. We are not the greatest nation in the world. Yeah, we've got faults. But the beauty about it is we are the only nation that we look at our faults and we correct them and we move forward.
So you're hitting some hot buttons there in terms of particularly the school system, and that Jill, my wife, Dr. Jill Glassell Malone, and co-author, we're talking about this yesterday, that we're now of a certain age. I'm 65, she's 64. And we grew up in California. And the California schools back then were very different from what they are now.
Yeah.
They have gifted and talented programs. Those are all gone. And there was a strong commitment to civics and civic education. I remember reading books as a third grader that had significant Christian content, and that obviously would not be allowed currently.
No, C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien. I mean, all those books. So, yeah, I used to go to the library specifically looking for them. But if you don't mind, I want to bring Dr. Ridgley in on this conversation because I just think he has a lot to add to this. So let's welcome aboard to the stage Dr. Stanley Ridgley, teeth in backwards. He's the author of DEI Exposed with Dr. Robert Maloney with his book, PsyWar, Enforcing the New World Order. I think I did enough talking today. I think my teeth just got turned around.
Hi, Stan.
Hi there, Dr. Malone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you. And hi, Ted and Ann. It's great. So, can you hear me okay?
Am I going to have to call you Dr. Ridgley if you're going to call me Dr. Malone? Or
you can call me Stan. How about that?
Stan the man.
There you go. I've never heard that one before.
Go figure. Go figure. You know, one of the things I was looking at as we were looking at some of the statistics and stuff, that prior to 1980, before the Department of Education was fully instituted, we were one of the top in education. We churned out anyone graduating before 1980 was the top of the top, the best of the best. But when you looked at the statistics they were showing for, I think it was 30 school districts in Connecticut, not one student graduated at their grade reading level. Zero. No, I'm sorry, Chicago. Not Connecticut, Chicago.
Oh, Chicago is a train wreck.
Chicago. Now, I grew up in New York, as you can tell from my dialect. I may have not been born in the South, but I got here as soon as I could, folks. That's my favorite saying. Not born in the South, but I got here as soon as I could. But what we have allowed to happen is generations of people graduating from our school districts unable to cope in our society because they don't understand it. They're not being taught our history. They're not being able to learn how to read, to add, subtract. I joked around about 10 years ago. I went through the shopping line and food line, and you know those little dividers you put between your groceries and the person behind you? Well, the checkout girl was trying to scan it, and she was asking for a price check on the divider. And I'm thinking, what are we turning out of our school system? But this is the psychological war. This is the war of DEI. This is the war that they're telling you that, oh, don't look behind the door where the wizard is. There's nothing to see here. Look at what we're telling you. That's the truth.
Or what you're feeling. It's all about reality is defined by your feelings, not by anything that's subjective. There's no longer a subjective truth.
Robert, you make a fantastic point that I think is at the bedrock of the DEI scam, the DEI con story, in that they're trying to get people to believe in an alternative reality that does not exist. It is a theoretical construct, and to deny the evidence of your own senses, your own lived experience, as they like to say. Don't pay attention to the disconfirmations of our theory. Put them aside and accept what we're saying now. And this is the kind of nonsense that's taught on the college campuses nationwide with respect to DEI. These people are real scoundrels. I'm going to take off the kid gloves with these people. They are scoundrels, rascals. They really have no business in a position of authority over students, involved in faculty hiring, and involved in what is taught in the classrooms. I think that we're on the right track now with certainly what happened at Michigan yesterday, where Michigan shuttered its entire DEI program, University of Michigan.
And it was that or lose funding, so they have a whole lot of latitude.
They're learning the Columbia lesson, and the fact is that Michigan was spending money like a drunken sailor. No offense to my brother-in-law, who was a graduate of the Naval Academy, spending money like a drunken sailor, $250 million since 2016 on DEI programs with over 260 employees.
I think DEI was a grift. It was a grift that benefited people that really weren't qualified. I mean, it's the same cohort. That's why all these objections were raised about merit-based hiring as opposed to the DEI system. These are folks that would not have thrived under a merit-based system, and they have, I personally buy into the thesis that this is fundamentally Marxist, that it's very much derived from a lot of the strategies that are deployed by the Central Communist Party and have been kind of mainstay in modern Marxism, and they have just been adapted. That the thesis that communism and Marxism was no longer tenable based on economics. And so they had to reposition the strategies around some other logic, and that was this logic of social grievance and the belief that people have somehow been disempowered systemically, and there needs to be some structural reconciliation for that. And
I can't plug. The two of you are plugging each other's book perfectly for me, so I'm just going to throw my notes out the window because everything you're saying, Dr. Malone or Bob, and is what Stan has written in his book. And Stan, everything you were saying about yours, Dr. Malone has written in his book. I mean, the two of you, as I said, dovetail each other so beautifully. And it is, we've said it from the get-go, it is a con game. And they don't have any way to fund what they need to do their what do you call it? Surveillance capitalism, the cultural capitalism also.
Yeah, the surveillance capitalism generates tons of capital. That one's a profitable venture. That's kind of different. That's what makes Silicon Valley run.
The cultural capitalism that turns around and guilts you and makes you feel like, oh, wait a minute, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm the bad person. I'm the white privileged person, so I have a lot to atone for. So in order to atone, I'm going to fork over big bucks. It is a I'd say not billion, but $1 trillion business.
Yeah.
Dr. Ridgley.
One of the it's actually pegged at around $10 billion yearly. It is a grift, as Bob says. That's the subtitle of the book, The Biggest Con of the Century That Almost Toppled Higher Education. Psychology has a word for this, or a name for this. It's called virtuous victimhood. If you can convince someone that they are a villain and that you have been victimized, then you can use this resource extraction strategy to bilk them with reparations. And getting universities to buy into this virtuous victimhood was a tour de force that occurred back in 2020. Prior to 2020, with the death of George Floyd, a criminal in the streets of Minneapolis, DEI had been scratching at the door, trying to get a foothold in the campuses, and had very little success. But after the death of George Floyd and the pandemic got people agitated and fearful, it presented a wonderful opportunity. And it was almost like a reprise of Jesse Jackson's old protection racket back in the 80s and 90s, when he would go to a corporation. And he would say, that's a nice corporation you've got there. Be ashamed if something happened to it. Why don't you pony up a donation? Well, DEI folks are saying, hey, that's a nice university you've got there. Be ashamed if the looting and the burning came to your school. And of course, the doors open wide for a bunch of modestly educated people with no discernible skill set to come onto the campuses to train people. Now, you're probably wondering, why are people have bought into this scam so well? It's because DEI has been put out there as a kind of with no real definition. Every person, good-hearted person, has an empty decanter, and they've been told you can pour whatever you want to into this decanter. Good feelings, vanity, your own virtue, and you can call that DEI. So this is why people get so agitated when people like myself or you criticize DEI, and they call you racist or primitive, et cetera, because you're criticizing them. You're criticizing their virtue. You're criticizing their narcissism, when in fact DEI is a very primitive ideology of it's two categories: good and evil, oppressors and oppressed, exploiters and exploited, villains and victims, all under the umbrella of a permanently, irredeemably racist America, which is riven with white supremacy culture. It's a wonderful, if you want to recognize and admire a scam, this is a damn good one. And it's
well, it's one of the oldest ones in the world, right? I mean, it's a kissing cousin to the old Catholic Church business about buying your way to heaven.
Oh, yeah. That's what I said. And believe me, I taught Catholic school to 5 and 6 year olds in St. Bridget's Roman Catholic School, way back younger. You were probably still in school, Bob, when I was doing that. I was married to my first husband by then. Anyway.
And you probably know my friend James Lindsay.
I greatly respect James Lindsay. Our paths have never crossed. But he's got some great stuff. New Discourses website and his program, and he is an erudite guy. His book Cynical Theories with Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian was just fantastic.
You ought to try to hook up with him. I think the two of you could probably do some damage to a bottle of scotch, if nothing else.
Oh, throw me in. Throw me in with the scotch.
You there too, right? In?
Oh yeah. I've got 3 different kinds on my bar.
Ian, can I jump in here?
Sure, absolutely. Please do, Ted.
Well, I think you both are kind of alluding to this, Stan and Bob, about the control by the communists, how we're going into that. The left is pushing us this way. I mean, it's pretty evident. And then Bob, you brought up the WHO, how they're putting out these mandates. And you look at who's controlling that, it's pretty much China. And then you look at the UN. The UN has their sustainable development goals, their 17 goals, and it's not about nationalities. It's all about this control by the UN of what everybody on the planet should do. And
Agenda 2030.
You look at what's going on in our farming community. You look at what's going on in Holland with the farmers over there that have had these farms for 400 or 500 years.
Yeah.
Out of the UN and out of the WHO, they're saying, well, you can't farm. You've got too many cows because of climate, and they make the poor countries sound like they're getting hurt worse by the climate because they're poor countries. And this is a big ball. And it's great to have people like you, knowledgeable, writing books on this, exposing this and letting people really know these things. Because the path we're going on had Harris and Biden, or Harris won this last election.
They were all in on this.
The States would have been over.
Yeah, they were all in on the.
Yeah.
I like to point out. So remember that we have another big player, or kind of a matrix of players that are sitting above all this, which is the BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard,
Exactly.
Integrated situation that absolutely has ties back to CCP. And the irony there, of course, is that a lot of that is collectively our money. It's coming from pension funds, but it's being weaponized against us. And I like to make the point that capital no longer is no longer coupled to nation state. We used to think that capital would kind of reside within the structure of the nation state from whence it was derived, if you want to talk about surplus value in Marxist theory, for instance. But that's no longer the case. Capital is set free now to roam the world seeking return on investment, and it will go wherever it can get the best ROI. It's not American. It's decoupled from America. And even though it's derived from the labor and the natural resources, in many cases, of the United States and the U.S. economy. And these are the folks that are the big backers, of a lot of, really almost all of these multinationals. BlackRock is apparently on track to control something like 80% of the businesses in the United States within a couple of years. And they are closely aligned with this entity that we call the World Economic Forum, that I assert is basically a trade organization of the 1,000 largest companies, which is intrinsically corporatist. Corporatist being a synonym, according to Benito Mussolini, the true name that should have been used instead of fascism. Right. But the WEF is absolutely corporatist, and then they have literally a treaty, a written agreement with the United Nations, which is intrinsically socialist, by the way. It's headed up by a socialist. He's the former head of the Socialist Party in Portugal. He's a former socialist PM of Portugal. He was head of the Socialist International, and then he failed up to be head of the United Nations. And so you have this very explicit linkage between corporatism and socialism on the global stage. And they believe this is the New World Order. My spin on this that's in the book, we talk about this in a couple of chapters. The model for the way they want to rule the world, and that's not an overstatement, is the European Council. And a lot of folks that haven't shuttled back and forth across the Atlantic like I have lately are fairly clueless about what this is. So the European Council is appointed, and they basically run the European Union. And all of the member states of the European Union have basically given up their sovereignty. So if you're in the Bundestag in Germany and you vote for some new policies, you may think that that would be sufficient, just the same as if Ted and his colleagues voted in some new bill on the Hill. But it's not the case. You can be overruled by the European Council, which is entirely appointed. And that is the model that the UN and the World Economic Forum wish to advance for this new global government that they envision. And they literally state that they are the new global government. They don't hide this. This is one of those amazing things. They don't hide their intentions. They're right out in the open in your face. And they are very closely aligned with the CCP. You can see that in, for instance, if you look at what transpired with the WHO, the World Health Organization, in their investigations over the origin of the COVID virus, the SARS-CoV-2. Every single scientist on that report that was put out by the WHO, which concluded that it was a natural origin, were Chinese. They didn't seek, or that Ralph Barrick, who had a dog in that fight. So I'm sorry, not Barrick, it was Daszak in that case. So you have, it's not some paranoid tin hat fantasy thing.
No, it's not.
It's all readily available. You can find all this information yourself. You don't, the book has got pointers and it's got a lot of references and links, and you can follow those, but you can do your own diligence.
Well, it's funny because as I'm reading all this stuff that both of you have written so well, it was bringing me back to the start of the COVID outbreak. And I had friends of mine that were missionaries in the Wuhan province, and they were telling me back in 2019, get yourself face masks, gloves, make yourself hand sanitizer. They were going to them and knocking on their doors saying, you're not going to be treated in the hospital if you get sick. So you better leave now. And then I questioned, why is the major outbreak just at the time of the Chinese New Year, when the Chinese travel the longest areas throughout the world to spread it? And why are they coming through the Wuhan?
But they were not allowed to travel internally. They were allowed to travel internationally, but not
which domestic. A lot of them went to Italy. Italy was using them for labor. You got the Belt and Roads initiatives. They were piling them in over there, and I'm reporting about this back in 2019. And as I'm doing this, I'm finding that I'm being shadowed by them, and my website goes down. And I'm in the middle of the show talking about it, and the website goes down. So I'm waiting to see if they're going to do that now. But there's a lot of this that we were seeing. But when you put it down into the words, it coalesces everything that I believed in all these years. And we can go even further back to a lot of other things that were being pulled over our eyes. The newest thing is now the measles outbreak. Oh, heaven forbid now we all have to go and bury ourselves once again because of measles. It is a psychological war. It is a war.
Have you noticed that the measles storyline has collapsed, as has the bird flu storyline? Credit for that, I think, really does deserve to go with President Trump and Bobby Kennedy. I think that they have very effectively countered both of those PSYOP, I call it psychological bioterrorism campaigns. Donald Trump focused on the price of eggs. And I had had some chats with Bobby suggesting and written in our Substack about the idea that this mass culling is just not working. And
No.
the only way, because it's endemic in all of the wildfowl, including the waterfowl, there's no way we're going to not have bird flu. It's everywhere.
Right.
And the only way out of the woods is to breed more resistant broilers and layers, because these are so line bred, these chickens, and they're in such high stress environments, they're very susceptible to any kind of infectious disease. And
There's a lot to what you were saying, because if we try to vaccinate them, we lose an entire international market, because they will not accept these birds, these fryers that have been vaccinated.
well,
But then
plus,
again,
you're assuming that the vaccine is worth a tinker's damn. And
exactly,
the truth is
exactly.
that what they were going to deploy was an H5N2 vaccine, so it's not even matched. It's not even close to being. And even, this, as a bona fide influenza vaccine expert, okay, I actually used to do this for a living once upon a time.
Nah.
And there are no influenza vaccines that aren't leaky. And so if you deploy a leaky vaccine into a chicken house, and I'll bet Ted knows what I'm talking about with the chicken house, not everybody does.
I do.
But
We're not talking one with the red light in front with ladies out there.
No, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of birds in a very small space that are cycled, and they pull out the litter and then put in more litter and run another flock of birds through. And it's really quite abusive in terms of the practices. And the broilers are genetically engineered so that, frankly, if they don't cull them, they don't harvest them at the right point in time, they start dying because their breasts are so large they can't walk anymore if you wait an extra week. I mean, these are highly, they're not GMO. People, a lot of people, urban people don't get the idea that there is an old school way for breeding animals, but they assume everything is GMO if it's bred for some purpose. But these animals are intrinsically driven. They've been bred for an endpoint, which is cropping them, and production and price per weight in terms of the broilers and the meat. And they are not bred for resistance, and they're not bred for being able to handle these kinds of stresses. And so it's sweeping through. What I hear, Ted, by the way, I just recently learned about the H5N1 is that chickens have the same deep lung receptors that we have, but they're basically in more superficial areas. And Ted will tell you that chickens are very unique. They don't go in and out with their airway. It kind of circulates around. So they are very susceptible to these particular influenza receptors that are in our deep lung. And usually the flu virus doesn't hit that. But what it's apparently doing is it's triggering a diffuse coagulation, and they are dying at very high rate, at a very rapid rate, within days, from basically a rampant blood clotting disorder. And that's what's doing it. And so the question is, can they be bred so that they're more resistant to this? And furthermore, are there agents that could be administered? They have to be really cheap because the price point on birds is so tight. But are there things that could be administered in the feed? And one of the things that's being talked about is quercetin. So there are ways. We don't have to just, do the same damn thing that we've been doing for decades and failing at for decades. This is a great opportunity for American ingenuity to get us out of this. And then the measles outbreak, of course, measles outbreak is another fraud. The death, it turns out, was really a medical mismanagement story. It had nothing to do with measles. It had to do with misdiagnosis.
As you know, the influenza virus, it changes all the time. I mean, there's so many serovirus out there that whatever you make today, it's already outdated, because they, the way they change, they're so multivalent. And, you've got to go through that natural selection and pick those strains that you maybe got sick and survived it. The scary thing with H5N1 is it was picked up in the dairy in Texas by a veterinarian who happened to send it to her friend in Colorado, who happened to test it for influenza, and it came back H5N1. And what they saw was a 10 to 20% decrease in milk production. And now they've seen it go into the cats, and there's wild hogs that are getting it. And it's been in the people, but it's not yet being transmitted. I think this is something that needs to be monitored. Do I want an H5N1 vaccine now? No. I think I'll hold off. I like herd immunity theory.
Hey,
that's what
Tony Fauci I'm sure Tony Fauci is busy building an H5N1 mRNA vaccine in Siena, Italy, right this very minute.
If he's in Italy doing that, is he still working on Corona for the next gain of function one?
That's so the gain of function, Ted, is an interesting, you mentioned Texas. So you may or may not know of this outlet in Boston called Stat News. It's not my favorite.
I follow that.
It's not my favorite, but they definitely reflect Boston biotech point of view. And,
I lived in Boston. Oy vey.
Oy vey is right. Oh, you're Jewish Italian. Good job.
Well, actually, my grandmother used to say, Anuch, there'd be no difference between an Italian and a Jew. The only difference would be we put a tomato in our chicken soup. Talking about chickens.
So Stat News revealed that Pfizer has a collaboration with a Texas researcher that's doing gain of function research on SARS-CoV-2 and related coronaviruses at behest of Pfizer in order to help them engineer the next round of vaccines. This is something that Texas legislature was completely unaware of when I testified about it. They still wouldn't ban gain of function research. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know, since I'm going down that rabbit hole to continue, is that even if, let's say, President Trump or Bobby suddenly says, thou shalt not engage in gain of function research, okay? All that does is it, like what Obama did, all it does is it prohibits the use of federal funds to support gain of function research. That does nothing for the likes of Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, Merck, et cetera, fill in the blank, because they got the capital. They can continue doing that ad nauseum for as
it
long
takes
as
the
they
American
want.
government out of it, and then you got somebody like China who's going to do it anyways. And
if I can interject here, something I want to roll it back to what Bob was saying a few minutes ago with respect to the connections or the openness of the folks. So there's no conspiracy theory. They're doing everything right in the open, and you report this in your book. And this is what I find absolutely amazing. What is really bothers me is the obduracy of people and resisting this kind of information. I've been told, "Oh, Dr. Ridgley, you're connecting the dots of all these things that are going on in the college campus." I said, "No, I'm not connecting any dots. The picture is already there for you, and I'm just simply showing you the picture. This is what they say that they're doing. This is how well they're doing it." The DEI scoundrels and scalawags, they're on the campuses. They're poorly educated. They are indoctrinating students, faculty, and staff in this primitive Manichaean binary, and they're saying they're doing it. I'm not connecting any dots. I'm simply, I'm the media providing it. I think that Bob knows what I'm talking about. It's amazing that folks will not look at the evidence and draw the proper conclusion. They are so invested in what they already believe, and that's the
distracted.
real
They're distracted and they don't pay attention. I'm glad you brought that back up, and if I may go back to what you were talking about, the World Economic Forum in Davos. You remember Klaus Schwab? He said by 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I want that to sink into the listeners. You will own nothing and you will be happy, because they're going to decide what you're going to have. And then you look at the DEI that was going on. Jamie Dimon and the Fink, Larry Fink. Jamie Dimon said, "You'll go woke or you'll go broke." Now he's backed off of that because they've lost that fight for the time being. But that fight's not going away. It will be back. And the dumber down our population gets, not just in America, but in the world, the easier it becomes for them to do that. They want to control the resources.
You just said something important, which brings me over to Stan's book, The Dumbing Down. Since 1980, we have been dumbing down our population education deliberately. So the less they think on their own and the more they follow like sheeple, the more they're willing to buy the con game. This is The Sting. Do you remember the movie The Sting with Robert Redford and Paul Newman? This is it on steroids 10 times over. And it is one humongous con game that you point out in your book. And you use Anna Kournikova in a lot of the descriptions that actually peels away the shell on the shell games. Yeah. And it's important that both books are being read by people that are listening. You've got to educate yourself because our system didn't educate you enough. Teach yourself and teach yourself now.
Yeah, one of the real problems you mentioned in the declining in Chicago and the Connecticut that you mentioned is not just the students who are being shortchanged, but it's the teachers. The teachers that are going into and being prepared by our education schools, our abysmal education schools, the bottom feeders of higher education. Teachers are no longer, generally speaking, going into subject areas, math, science, et cetera, et cetera. They're being taught education theory. And they go into the K through 12 teaching education of the SEL, social emotional learning, that kind of thing. And they're really applying a political agenda. I speak about this in my other book, my previous book, Brutal Minds, which is on the shelf behind you there. Thank you, Ann.
The first interview I did with you.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And I talk about how the education schools have been the font of so much of what has been the decline of higher education, but also the decline of our K through 12. So it's not a conspiracy. It's a very planned, intentional project that is quite open to anyone who wants to look at it. The only problem is that there's a lot of people who like it, and they're the ones who are in charge. And there's a lot of people who support it who don't really know what it's about and really don't want to look at the evidence, because that would delegitimate their entire belief system over what they think and believe higher education really is, that it hasn't changed in really the last 40 years or so, that it's not this indoctrination or crucible of indoctrination. As Bob mentions, Marxism is really at the core of all of this. If you look at I'm sorry?
It's cultural Marxism now.
Yes, it is. And the fact is that we've got this binary system of villains and victims, oppressors and oppressed. That's straight out of the Marx playbook. The idea of class conflict. It's been replaced and modified, augmented by race, class, and race and gender. And now instead of class consciousness, we have what is called critical consciousness. And this is really fundamentally what the social justice warriors, the socialists on the college campuses want to do. And I think, Ted, that you are right. It's not going to go away. And I've taken it's not an extreme position. If what I say is correct in my books, then I believe these people really ought to be expunged from the college campus. They have no business in student-facing positions. They have no business having any contact with students whatsoever. They need to be expunged from the campuses, and I think that I'm hoping that this administration is the one's going to come closest to getting that done.
Well, and Ted, I just want to point out something that you and I've discussed, and I've discussed this with the people because I still run a Tea Party actively now for the last 16 years, and we do meet monthly, and we've got our school chair at our next meeting, and you have to be involved on the local level. You have to be able to go to your school board meetings, your county, your city councils, whatever you have out there, parishes, whatever you have. You've got to be involved on the local level. And this is where you stop it. Because if the federal government sees you, weakening, they're going to turn around, well, this community let it go through, so we may have a chance of passing it in the state. If the state takes it, then we take it to the federal level. But no, you've got to stick your guns in here locally. We did that, and we stopped the mask mandate here in South Carolina. We got our schools open faster. We got a school superintendent in here that improved our graduation rates because we stood up, and I went before the school board and I apologized to the school superintendent and says, I'm sorry, we voted the school board in and I apologize for doing that. We're going to take care of that. And we did. That's what reading these books are important. Getting involved in your local community is important, and voting for people like Ted Yoho into office.
You like that? What do you got against me? Well, you guys,
yeah, Ted, you remind me when Steve Bannon said to me, Robert, why don't you run for the House? I said, Steve, you want to send me straight to hell, don't you?
it was an honor to be there. I ran on term limits. I honored those, and it was a great time. But I'm sure everybody's aware of the PISA scores, right? That's the Program for International Student Assessment. It's where they take all the nations and they say, all right, this nation's here, this nation's here. We have been falling for the last 20 years in reading, math, and arithmetic. You can't lead a free world if you don't have a well-educated.
Right. Oh, yes, we can. We have artificial intelligence.
You mean Joe Biden?
You can't have a constitutional republic without a well-informed electorate. And so that's what's at risk here. And then I had another thought, and it just slipped my mind because I'm going to be 70 next month.
Oh, happy birthday.
It'll come back to me here in a minute.
Anyway.
Ted,
I know what it is. Hang on before I lose it. The PISA scores, and Bob or Stan, you were talking about this. The teachers, they're not teaching those things. It was, I forget the word you said, it was teaching thought theory or something.
Educational theory. The idea that, they're not teaching math science because they're not qualified to do so. They're imbued, soaked in education theory.
That's exactly right. And if you look in New Jersey, they can't hire teachers that are qualified. So they're hiring teachers that aren't certified in math, in reading, or in math, science, and reading. They're not even certified in this, and they're training our next workforce. I mean, does anybody see a problem 5, 10, 15 years from where we are today? We're going to need AI.
Yeah, those are the useless eaters. And we're going to have to put them on guaranteed basic income until they die out, right? And meanwhile, we'll give them toxic vaccines. Well,
the education school's problem that you're talking about, Ted, that is producing these people, it's really wholly based on, I should say that Marxism, you still can't say Marxism these days. You can't say the M word. You certainly can't say the C word, but the S word, socialism, you really can't say that either. So instead of talking about Marxism, they simply brought in Marxist theory under a fellow by the name of Paulo Freire. And Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator, a crypto Maoist. He really admired Mao and cribbed most of his education theory from education theory of Mao Zedong. And so now teachers, they revere Paulo Freire. He's in their pantheon. His book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is really their manual. And they say, well, it's Freirean. It's not Marxist, it's Freirean. And they're really just finding it. They found someone to launder their dirty theory from Marx on into the education school. Oh, we don't have Marx, we have Freire. And
it goes back to Sarah Palin. You can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So when you get Freire, they mean Mao.
Sarah absolutely added some things to the political lexicon. Drill, baby, drill. Remember that one?
Well, you see, this is one of the things I noted on both of your books, and I call it the linguistics gymnastics. And they will throw so many words that just are incomprehensible into this one statement.
Language.
And it is. They have weaponized the language around it. And you go, well, I don't understand it, but it sounds intelligent, so it's got to be right.
Well, guys, I have a glossary at the back of DEI Exposed, in which I provide a link, kind of an Orwellian type of newspeak, a linguistic definitions. When they use this word, here is what they really mean. And I think that's very
good.
Very
I haven't read the book. I need to read it.
Well, I'm looking.
I was in a meeting in Taiwan back when I was in Congress, and they brought in the Chinese delegations because of the conflict between Taiwan and China. And they had their version of an AOC. I forget her name, Starry somebody. And she was talking about, well, we're not communists. We're socialist, social capitalists with Chinese characteristics. Yeah. I says, your name of your party is the Chinese Communist Party. I said, you can call it whatever you want. It's communism, period. Oh, she was mad. It was, they're trying to cover it. No, we're not that way. You know, it is a game, but it's a dangerous game because it's for control, the world control, and China's running this. I mean, that and like Antonio Gutierrez from the UN, the Secretary General, he's a leftist and anti-American, along with
he's gone.
Tedros from the WHO.
Yeah. Well, we got to say one good thing is we've pulled out funding to the WHO. So that was pulled out, I believe, yesterday. That was done. I'd like to see us withdraw from the WEF. I'd like to see the UN get out of the United States, send it to, I don't know, The Hague, somewhere over there.
In a country where they need the UN's help. We don't need them here. And we can be an advisor and not pay 27% of their operating budget in different programs. I'm all for that. And it's not about being an isolationist. It's just, I don't need, if I need your help, last.
Yeah, Ted, the counterpoint that I've heard that I think has certain attraction is if we give up the Security Council, then we've got a potential problem. But they're trying to get rid of the Security Council anyhow. So maybe that resolves itself. But
I've heard that argument, and you look at who's on the Security Council, who normally vote against us the whole time. And I think it's, what Trump did with USAID, I never thought that aid would go away, but it took somebody like Trump to come in and say, we're getting rid of it. You can't do it slowly because you're going to have a midterm election in 2 years. And if he loses the majority, you can't do it. So what he did was what needed to be done. And on the Security Council, I think if we make that strong motion and move publicly like that, it's going to rattle what you're seeing going on in the EU right now. I mean, they're talking about putting $1 trillion into defense in the EU, which it's about time. Stand up. The Ukraine war, it's not our war. We're members of NATO, and we should participate as much as every other country in NATO.
Well, gents, I hate to cut this off, but we're down to our last 3 minutes, and that's when I close the show.
Really?
I want to thank you all for joining us. It has been a blast. I knew the two of you were going to just be jam-up jobs, Stan and Bob. Thank you for joining us. Your books can be both found on Amazon, which is the PsyWar with Dr. Robert Malone, and also the DEI Exposed with Stanley Ridgley. I didn't realize your book was behind me on the bookshelf. It's been there for God knows how long.
You guys,
but it was a good book.
I like that. I like that.
You guys
but your final thought, Ted. I heard last night people throwing around a new Democratic plate running out there, platform. I mean, possibly AOC and Kamala Harris, or AOC and Jasmine Crockett. Just to get your skin to crawl.
We can only hope
I'm with
that's
you.
what it is. Let's
there is a God.
and keep in mind, AOC, before the election, the presidential election, she was telling everybody how great Joe Biden was and how he needed to be reelected. I mean, you talk about being clueless or a liar, and probably a little bit.
She's another grifter.
I'm just ignorant.
She's a self-promoter. That's what she is. She's a grifter.
Well, gentlemen, it has been a blast, and I want to thank you for joining us. We've got to do this again. This is just too much fun. Absolutely too much fun.
Meeting you guys in person and following up with you.
Okay. All right. Dr. Robert Malone, thank you very much. And Stan, thank you also. And you have a blessed day. Ted, thank you for sitting in for us. And we have a blast. Okay. Take care. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut him off, but thank you, Ted. Anyway, my bad. So with that, I leave you folks. We will be back next week. We've got Mark Tapscott joining us. And oh, geez, it ran out of my head who the second guest is. But we have a lot of fun coming on next week. And C.S. Bennett will be back with us. So with that, I say good night.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Mourn for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind their lies. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Mourn for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. For the friends we have loved and lost, and we still believe in God we trust, in the freedom our forefathers granted us. We know it's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save America.